Hello and welcome to my third lecture on construction contracts, bonds and guarantees. In this lecture, I will cover aim of the subject, explanation of bonds and guarantees, parties to the bonds, types of bonds, and conclusion. Aim. The aim of this lecture is to achieve understanding, knowledge, and ability to negotiate, review contents of bonds, or prepare draft with simple and proper legal wording to cover risks contingent with improper bonds and guarantees. Explanation of bonds and guarantees. A bond in construction term is same as a guarantee, and the two words are treated as synonymous. It is a three-party contract whereby the surety, for example a financial institution, provides an irrevocable guarantee to the employer that the contractor will faithfully and dutifully complete its obligations under the contract. A bond is an extension on the basis that the legal obligations bonded will be fulfilled and completed with and complied with. Bonds premium is designed to cover the surety's underwriting expenses only. Many words are synonymous and are used in different names in different countries. For example, bonds is synonymous with guarantees, guarantor with surety or obliger, bank with bondsman, principal creditor with obligee, beneficiary with the employer, principal debtor with contractor, as the case may be. Likewise, performance with default and unconditional with on demand. The three parties to the bonds are the employer, the contractor, and the surety. Surety does not have much risk as after it has responded to the call upon the bond made by the employer, it has immediate recourse to the contractor. Unless the contractor becomes insolvent, the surety will recover the money. Types of bonds. Default bonds, which are called performance bonds. On-demand bonds, including the hybrid conditional on-demand bonds. Within these two generic types of bonds, there are five types of principal bonds mostly used in construction contracts. These five categories are classified as follows: tender or bid bonds, advance payment bonds, performance bonds, retention bonds, warranty for maintenance bonds. In USA, there is also a requirement of bonds from main contractor to guarantee payments to its subcontractors. Tender or bid bonds. These bonds guarantee that the bidder will enter into a contract to undertake the works at the bid price. If the tenderer withdraws its bid at any time before bid opening, then the tender bond will be returned to the bidder. However, if the bidder withdraws its tender after the bid have been opened, whether the reason for such withdrawal is the non-judgmental mistake made in the bid or otherwise, the bid bond will be forfeited. Advance payment bonds. These bonds guarantee the reimbursement of the advance payment made to the contractor. Normally, the reimbursement is made in installments from the interim monthly or milestone payments due to the contractor. Advance payment bond is required to secure the payment against default by the contractor. The advance payment bond will protect the employer in the event that the contractor fails to fulfill its contractual obligations, for example, if the contractor becomes insolvent. All advance payment bonds will normally be on demand bonds, meaning that The surety pays the amount of money set out in the bond immediately on demand, without any preconditions having to be met. This is opposed to a conditional bond or default bond where the surety is on only liable if it has been established that there is a breach of contract. Advance payment bond must be very carefully drafted and agreed by the employer to set out the circumstances for payment and to make clear that they are on demand bonds. Performance bonds. Performance bonds guarantee performance by the contractor under the contract. Performance bond is issued to the employer as a guarantee against the failure of the contractor to meet its obligations under the contract. Performance bond guarantees that the contractor will complete the works in accordance with the terms of the contract. A performance bond is a financial guarantee that the terms of the contract will be honored. If one party to a contract cannot complete their obligations, the bond is paid out to the other party to compensate for their damages or costs. These bonds are provided to protect parties from concerns such as contractor being insolvent before finishing the contract. When this happens, the compensation provided for the party that issued the performance bond may be able to overcome financial difficulties and other damages caused by the insolvency of the contractor. Retention bonds. A certain percentage of the running bill or interim payment is withheld from each and every time when the bill or interim payment application is submitted to the employer by the contractor. This accumulated amount is withheld by the employer and paid 50% on substantial completion and further 50% on final completion. Retention is a financial security withheld by the employer to ensure that the contractor adequately fulfills its obligations under the contract. It is also used as a safeguard against defects in case the contractor fails to remedy them. In lieu of release of retention money, earlier the contractor submits a retention bond. A retention bond is like other bonds involves three parties: a contractor, employer, and the bond provider, for example, financial institution. Under the retention bond, the surety will act as guarantor between the two parties. The surety will pay the obligation demand up to the retention amount paid if the contractor fails to perform the obligations or remedy defects within the defects liability period or maintenance period. Waiting for retention money to be released is a pain point for the contractor. This delay in payment puts a strain on cash flow, especially considering retention amounts even exceeds the profit margin anticipated for the project. By issuing a retention bond, contractors may be able to get their hands on retention money earlier to keep the cash streamlined and flowing. Warranty bonds. Warranty bonds guarantee the contractor's performance during the warranty period, putting right any defects or warranty issued that arise. It is intended to protect against design defects or failure in workmanship or materials or equipment. Warranty bonds are limited to a fixed period of time, normally the same as the warranty defects maintenance period stipulated in the contract. Default or conditional bonds put an obligation on the issuer to pay subject to the provision by the employer sufficient evidence that the contractor has defaulted on a term of the contract and that the employer suffered damages in consequence. On-demand or unconditional bonds put an obligation on the issuer to pay as the name suggested on demand without the requirement to prove that the default to prove the default, and even without any default or breach have been arisen. The principle is that pay now, argue later. The only resistance to such a bond for the contractor is to prove fraud. The wording used in defining the exact type of bond to be provided is extremely important, and it is wise to try to keep it as simple as possible when conveying the intentions of the parties. The following points are useful in this respect. The contractor should try to ensure that it has the opportunity to defend itself against a call. It should be stated clearly that whether the bond is on demand or conditional. Keep in mind that an on demand bond will involve pay now and argue later. Use simple language consistent with the contract wording to minimize confusion. Clear drafting of the conditions means conditional bonds is critical. Currency unit and currency value of the bond must be stated clearly.